The first thing to mention about Nagoriyuki is how they've expanded his training mode options. So let's go ahead and look at character-specific settings in the old patch. Underneath Blood Gauge, you only had 3 settings before: Normal, Rapid Regeneration, and Blood Rage. This meant that if you wanted to lab specific sequences with Nago that required him to have blood level 1, 2, or 3, you had to manually set it up by having the character use special moves. Let's take a look at the training mode settings now. There's 2 levels for Nago now: Blood Gauge and Blood Rage. You set Blood Rage to continuous, he'll be in his Blood Rage state, pretty much allowing you to lab this version of Nagoriyuki at any time. When we look at Blood Gauge then, we're actually able to start from level 2, level 3, and have it fixed as well at any of these levels to make sure that you're able to continuously lab out sequences of Nagoriyuki. This is important because the properties of some of his normals do change depending on what Blood Gauge level that he is at. So overall, this is a nice quality of life change to the game that allows it to be easier for us to set up situations where we can lab Nagoriyuki at different stages of the match. And now for our usual discussion about defense modifier values. For Nagoriyuki, they've been decreased like most of the cast, so now he takes less damage overall. A blood level 1 Nagoriyuki took 98 damage from the sequence. Meanwhile, a blood level 3 Nagoriyuki took 122. As for the current patch, blood level 1 Nago takes 93 damage now, while a blood level 3 takes 117, so it looks like we're losing about 5-6 damage overall between these 2 versions. Again, this will make it so that Nagoriyuki will be able to survive some sequences that killed him before. However, his guts have also been decreased, which means he takes more damage when he gets at lower life values. This, in conjunction with the change to his defense modifier value, means that when he gets to lower health thresholds, he's going to be taking about the same damage as he was in the previous patch. At 25% HP, that sequence did 56 damage in the previous patch. As for the current patch, it still does 56 damage, and again, keep in mind that this is a Nagoriyuki with a decreased defense modifier value, so without this change to his guts, he would have taken less damage in this sequence at this health threshold here. Nago's 6P now has increased recovery on it. It's a fairly dramatic difference in my eyes, even without the side-by-side comparison that I've been able to give all of you. So, again, this will mean that if Nago whiffs this, there's more of an opportunity for him to be punished for it. His 6K has 2 adjustments from it. The first one is that it's been adjusted to maintain momentum on cancel. In the previous patch, if you connected with 6K, you were not able to connect into his blood-sucking universe. You'll also note that the opponent was not put into a crumple effect unless there was a counter hit. This meant that if Nago wanted to combo into Bloodsucking Universe before, he had to get a counter hit and then react to that to then reset his blood gauge. 6K will now crumple the opponent even on non-counter hit. This means that Nagoriyuki will be able to combo into Bloodsucking Universe without the need for a counter hit. Additionally, whenever you use 6K, it now retains momentum for the follow-up special move cancel. This means that Nagoriyuki will be able to use 6K in order to have forward momentum on any of his special cancels, keeping him in range to use things like Bloodsucking Universe, Shizuriyuki, and other specials. A byproduct of this is that if you Kara cancel 6K into a special move, he's going to inherit the forward momentum from 6K. This opens up potential new combo routes as well as pressure sequences for Nagoriyuki. And I know that many people have been decrying that they removed all of this Kara canceling from Potemkin, but then gave it to Nagoriyuki. However, I don't think it's going to be as particularly defining for the character as it was for Potemkin in the previous versions of Guilty Gear Strive, and I'll try to elaborate on why. For starters, getting this Kara cancel without having a buffer involved is quite difficult to do. There's 2 ways that you can fail this move. Either you try and press the 6K early enough and then cancel into a quarter circle forward punch to get the Bloodsucking Universe, but then 6K just comes out. Or if you try to do the full DP input and hold forward, the game is going to interpret that you're doing a Fukio input instead. And then instead of getting Bloodsucking Universe Kara cancel, you get Fukio forward. However, it is still possible to do it from a raw input like this. Secondly, if you are even able to set up spaces where you could make this connect, if you're trying to Gatling from this from normals that cancel into 6K, there's too much block stun for Nagoriyuki to get new tick throw ranges. So there's a little bit of utility lost here for Nagoriyuki. You're going to have a difficult input raw in order to make Bloodsucking Universe connect at farther ranges than you could before. Don't get me wrong, if you're able to execute that, then that's a pretty new powerful tool for the character to have that will jump scare the opponent at some ranges where they're not expecting it, but I don't think it's as essential for Nagoriyuki as it was for the previous version of Potemkin in order to hit these. I do think, however, there are more potential uses for this Kara cancel when it comes to combo routing for Nago. Courtesy of WizDumbWiz on Twitter, we can see that Nagoriyuki has several uses for these Kara cancels when it comes to his combo routing in order to create new links that didn't exist. A hallmark of these combos is that we're able to link more close slashes off of certain special moves that weren't possible before, as well as get links into 5K thanks to the advanced forward momentum that Nagoriyuki is getting in some mid-screen combo routing. Just for a very simple side-by-side comparison, we can check out what happens if you don't use these Kara cancels. You get far slash there for Nago. But with the Kara cancel, you're able to get that close slash. Again, I feel like the use for Kara cancels for Nagoriyuki is going to be more centered around his combo game rather than increasing the range of his tick throw, at least primarily. For those who can execute the Kara cancel to extend the range of Bloodsucking Universe, they'll certainly be able to appreciate that value. But I feel like most of the Nago player base is going to be taking advantage of these Kara cancels in his combo routing specifically. A side effect of this change, however, is that if you're able to Kara cancel 6K into a faultless defense, you're actually able to create a situation where Nago advances forward from the 6K momentum and then cancels it into a block, giving him the impression of doing what Ankle Gator here is describing as a wave dash. There's a couple different ways of inputting this, which Ankle Gator explores in this tweet here. So, there's a couple of techniques that you can utilize. You can hold back an FD and then blink kick into back 4. Then, if you hold back an FD and mash 6K, you get this result. You can explore more about the subject matter from Ankle Gator's Twitter. This change feels like it's not necessarily intended, but I'm not entirely sure if this is something that Arc System Works is going to even bother patching out of the game. They've updated their known bug list fairly recently, as I've mentioned in other videos, and this wasn't one of the changes or one of the behaviors that they marked was unintended. Furthermore, I feel like it's a controller-specific style of movement that you can use, because as you can hear from Ankle Gator, they're definitely playing on a hitbox. I've tried to emulate this on controller, and only using one of my fingers, my thumb, I'm not able to get this behavior to come out. So this could very well be a hitbox-only bit of tech for Nagoriyuki to go forward. We're going to get into the big changes for Nagoriyuki now in this patch, which effectively result in a minor rework of the character. Previously, his standing heavy slash and crouching heavy slash were huge normal moves that got buffed from the blood gauge and were always able to be special cancelled. This meant that at far ranges, Nagoriyuki could throw these out and then advance forward with Fukyo, or use other special moves into the combo routing in order for him to get high damage as well as pressure sequences. The moves have now been changed so that they are no longer special cancelable. This is a fairly big nerf for Nagoriyuki in theory. Especially when using a blood level 3-2 heavy slash to control half the sky, Nagoriyuki will now no longer be able to advance forward, so he gives up the ability to advance on the opponent in return for area coverage when he uses that move. And the same thing I think can be said for his 5 heavy slash. However, a couple other properties have been changed to give them buffs to compensate for this loss of functionality. In addition to not being able to be cancelled into special moves, you also can't cancel these heavy normals into supers either. Bear that in mind. As you might have noticed when I demonstrated this earlier, they now guard crush. However, this is to ensure that they inflict more chip damage on the opponent, as these guard crushes are actually still negative for Nagoriyuki to work with. They've also increased the damage on these normals whenever they do connect against the opponent. 5 heavy slash dealt 45 previously, and 2 heavy slash dealt 37 previously. In the current patch, 5 heavy deals 45 damage, and 2 heavy still deals 37 damage. But that's at blood level 1. As you might remember, when Nago levels up his blood gauge, these moves gain increased damage. At blood level 3, 5 heavy slash dealt 52 damage. 2 heavy slash went up to 45 damage. You're going to notice a significant increase in the damage of these normals now. 5 heavy slash raw at blood level 3 does 90 damage. And 2 heavy slash does 82 damage. I understand that they're doing this to namely compensate for the fact that you can no longer combo from these normals into special moves, but this almost feels like a little too much damage in some cases. However, you'll also note that once these moves do connect against the opponent, they're put into a hard knockdown. So there is plenty of compensation here to rework Nagoriyuki. He is going to be using less of these normals in terms of his block strings because he's not going to be able to advance forward with a special pressure anymore. So it feels like they're going to be high damage options for when he has higher blood gauge in order to try and mitigate that resource by bringing it down while also just doing a lot more damage to the opponent overall. This specific rework, I feel, clashes with Arc System Works' overall philosophy of trying to increase the number of interactions by reducing the damage, because they've ratcheted Nago's damage up incredibly high, and we'll go and explore that with some of the other changes to him in the patch. 6 heavy slash also had its damage increased. At blood level 1, it did 52 damage previously. Whereas at blood level 3, it did 67. As for the current patch, blood gauge level 1 does 52 damage with 6 heavy slash, while blood level 3 does 97. I understand that, again, these moves aren't able to be special canceled, and so you want to make sure that there's still something that a Nago player wants to use, but I even heard from some other Nago mains that this might be a little too much damage for the character. When I make mention of being worried about Nagoriyuki doing too much damage, I'm referring to sequences like this. This is courtesy of Otashi, who provides no other context for this clip.
No, I mean, that's how Andros plays against me too. I mean, Pot has to kind of do it, you know?
He kind of has to this patch.
What did he do?
I did reversal buster.
Oh my fucking
I mean,
god.
why would
That's
you
like...
What the fuck?
Yeah, fuck Potemkin. Yeah, fuck Potemkin, am I right? Yeah, fuck this guy.
That was Potemkin, one of the tankiest characters in the entire game, and Nagoriyuki, after getting a risk gauge cranked to about half, was able to two-shot the character because of these buffed heavy slashes. I mean, most other characters probably would have just died from that particular sequence right there. And I'm not calling out Nagoriyuki for being too strong or anything like that. I'm trying to direct my criticisms towards Arc System Works, who said one of their goals was to increase the number of interactions within Guilty Gear Strive and lower the overall damage. And yet we're seeing sequences like this come up. I know that one of their purposes said they wanted to preserve high damage off of certain starters, and I do think that Close Slash certainly can be one of those starters. But I feel like Close Slash wasn't the enemy right here, and that starter wasn't the enemy. It's all this extra damage they've thrown around to some power-type characters that are still keeping the game in this high volatile state where you can die in 2 hits if you're not careful. A change I'm sure that most players are aware of at this point, since it was featured in the trailer, is to Blood Rage, where they made the adjustments upon activation. They've increased the blowback and made it so the opponent will no longer have a hard knockdown, while they also expanded the frontal hitbox. All this results in a lot of utility for this move now. Previously, most Nago players who would utilize Blood Rage to pop and go for explosive mix-ups would do this at the end of a wall stick to then put the opponent into a knockdown 50-50 situation. You could then RC that overhead or go for a low and pretty much mix up the opponent. Depending on the sequence, this could be a 50-50 into death. Now the blowback has been increased to ludicrous range. With this, if you have the opponent slightly off the ground, you're actually able to pick up a combo from that blowback in the corner. So this means that Nagoriyuki players can choose to crank their blood gauge to maximum and either go for the same 50-50 setups that they had before, or extend the combo into a kill by accessing Blood Rage and then using his empowered supers in Blood Rage. Just to give a very brief demonstration of what's possible, if you get a wall splat at that height as well, you're going to get the same ability to link close slash. When you combine all the changes to Blood Rage as well as the increased damage to Nago's heavy normals, which again are scaling with more blood gauge, then you get situations like this. Hotashi kind of humorously posted this video calling it a Season 4 guide, but there's a lot that we can glean from actually.
So long, Jojo!
It is a pretty funny clip thanks to Hotashi's personality, but let's look at that situation and compare it to what Arc System Works has said they wanted from this patch. They wanted to increase the number of interactions between the players because they wanted to slow the game down and have less damage overall so that there's a little less volatility where it feels like, okay, if I get hit once, then I have to be put into a guess for game situation. Nago and his current balance flies in the face of that. We're not talking about like a close slash starter that led that sequence. The first hit Hotashi got was a 2K, which then led to a full corner carry into wall break, or not even wall break, but wall splat to a guess for game 50-50 situation. And as I've hopefully demonstrated with the clip against Potemkin earlier, this isn't just happening to Chip. This is happening to almost everybody in the cast where Nagoriyuki is two-shotting even the tankiest of characters with sequences like this. Now, don't get me wrong. If the Chip player was able to block that mix-up, Hotashi would have been in a pretty bad spot because then he has to run his offense without having any special cancels and he's draining his own life bar, so the Chip would have a window into the game. So I don't think that necessarily this all-in play style is going to be the most competitive variation of Nagoriyuki or the most consistent, but it's still there and it's still a little overtuned. Hotashi himself is on record in some of his YouTube videos saying that Nago is doing too much damage. Why is he doing Season 1 damage? And I feel like if Arc System Works toned down the damage of his heavy normals, then we'd be able to see a little healthier playstyle. As it is right now, if you want to play a mix-up character, you can play Nago and pretty much be fairly successful with it, albeit with more risk than someone like Milia, who's going to die in 2 touches to a sequence like this, but then needs 50-50-50s in a row in order to actually win the round, it feels like. We'll see overall. I do think that there's some cool things happening here from the patch, but as it is, it's a bit overtuned, and I want to see Arc System Works bring things more in line with the vision that they described rather than the vision that we're getting. Let's go ahead and put that tangent aside for now and focus on the last couple of patch note changes to Nagoriyuki. Zaremeyuki, his clone, has increased launch height on blowback. That 2 heavy slash with blood level 3 was not able to connect in the previous patch. But in the current patch, you are able to get that link now. So this does mean that this should be a more combo-friendly tool for Nago to open up some new links for him. Shizuriyuki's second hit has a blowback adjustment. In the previous patch, if you were able to hit the second hit on the grounded foe, it would cause a ground bounce on them. This meant you could Red Roman cancel and pick up a full combo from sequences where Nagoriyuki was threading true high-low mix-ups. And both of these highs and lows had some pretty great reward to them overall, putting the opponent into a true guess-for-game situation from Nagoriyuki, when he could spam out these special moves not caring about his blood gauge because you couldn't block this forever. With the removal of the ground bounce, if you go for this overhead now and then RC it, the opponent is OTG'd by the RC instead of full comboed. So Nago no longer has long combos off of this sequence, which means that he's not going to be able to kill you from as high of a life value as he was before. I think that this is a fine nerf overall. Nago is still able to put you into these guess for game situations, but for the overhead to actually be a true threat for you now, he has to have a lower life total on you. So pretty safely, if you have enough life, I would say that you should be blocking low, trying to fuzzy jump at command throw, and then letting the overhead hit you. Zansetsu, Nagoriyuki's super during blood range, has 2 changes to it. There's increased minimum guaranteed damage, so then you'll be able to ensure that this move is probably going to be killing the opponent whenever you do use it. However, upon activation, in the previous patch, nothing would really happen, you just get the super. But in the current patch, the moment you use the super, Nago's health is reduced to 1. Again, this enforces the all-in playstyle that Nagoriyuki is going to be having whenever you do plop Blood Rage. So this can be worked around, of course, by just making sure that the combo route is going to kill, which should be fairly easy to do given how much damage Nagoriyuki can do in this patch. But I do like overall how it's enforcing this identity for the character where there's high risk, high reward. Now that we're at the summary of the video, I want to make something very clear. I know I've spoken rather critically in this video, and my criticisms aren't necessarily directed at Nagoriyuki himself, but rather at Arc System Works, because what they've said and what is happening with this patch don't line up, and I feel like Nago is one of the best poster boys for that dissonance in their rhetoric and in their game balance. They've wanted to reduce the damage, that's what they've said in the patch notes, and yet with Nagoriyuki, his damage has been increased so much that they haven't been able to really accomplish that goal in my eyes when it comes to Nagoriyuki having more interactions with his opponent. He's still very much able to two-shot almost anyone on the entire cast, and it's not necessarily because he's getting like these sweet hits. He can almost do this just because of the high damage that his heavy attacks now have on them. I feel like if they tone down the damage a little bit for the character himself, they might be able to find that sweet spot. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like a lot of the changes that Nago is going through from a design philosophy. Effectively reworking his heavies to be these high damage, high pressure moves while losing their ability to be used in combos or some longer pressure sequences because they lost the ability to special cancel, I think is something that makes the character a little more unique compared to the rest of the cast. However, I do think that this identity is a bit overtuned, but we are all also looking at edge cases where Nago is successful. He is still a low mobility character, and he's going to be zoned out quite a bit, and so maybe there's this case to be made where he deserves to have this high damage for being able to get in. It's sort of balancing these strengths and weaknesses. I think that Nago is going to be a pretty good character within this patch. I don't know if he's top 5 material necessarily, but he's certainly going to be a character who has some of the best snowball potential in the game, and I feel like if that's toned down just a little bit to make him a little less volatile for people to fight against, that might be a healthier direction for the game to go into. I do think that there are some appropriate nerfs happening here as well, like the decrease to his guts rating, the increased recovery to his 6B, as well as Shizuriyuki not being this great overhead earlier on in this set in his high mix-up sequences. He certainly fulfills the identity of being a high-risk, high-reward character, but I feel like the reward for him right now is slightly overtuned. We'll see overall where he settles within the patch, as he certainly has his problematic matchups that are going to be keeping the character in check when it comes to bracket runs. I also like overall how there's a lot more choices going on with what you're using this for. If you were a character that all in and used blood range to set up the 50-50s, that was pretty much what you did. But now you can do that and also have the ability to get combos and extension off of them, which I honestly think is a very cool aesthetic for the character overall. We'll see where he falls in line. I like some of the direction. I just feel like there's a few things that need to be tweaked for Nagoriyuki to really fulfill the philosophy that Arc System Works is saying they're trying to achieve with the Season 4 patch.